Okay, everybody, welcome back to your crisis coach with the amazing Scott H. Silverman and myself, Fred Carroll. How are you, Mr. Scott?
I'm good, man. Had a nice Father's Day, nice and quiet. My oldest came over and hung out, and my youngest FaceTimed me first thing in the morning so she could get it out of the way, so she could go have her fun. She's the one back in New York, so it was a nice day, and I cooked for everybody, and we just chilled out. How about you?
Yeah, good. It was okay. I mean, it's my first Father's Day ever without my children around now that I moved away. But still waiting for my son to call me. I haven't heard from him, which isn't surprising. But I don't know if you saw my post. My kids know there's whoever messaged me first gets the better Christmas gift. On Father's Day. That's how I play the game. Well, I guess my son did technically win because he posted a story with a picture of him and I at 4 a.m, Utah time. And that was 2 hours before my daughter called me at 6 a.m. And now they're fighting who won. But he never called me.
Last Monday, I had, because I hadn't heard from my kids in a week, I had a It's Okay to Call Your Father Day last Monday, and my youngest called early, and my oldest told me she was busy. She'd call Tuesday.
Yeah, that's the life. You just don't, once you set them on their own and you did a good job, you don't hear from them until the bad stuff. But so you got a guest today. Who'd you bring with you?
Well, we flew Alex in because Alex, it was time to get to know her a little bit. She's been giving me a hard time lately, and I don't know what that's about. I think it's because of Tom, but we'll do more research. But Alex is an individual who has but a real commitment to what she does in her world, and clearly a big baseball fan, and calls on others to do things in a very subtle, direct, commanding way, which I admire, and I just felt that she would be a great guest to have. I have no idea what's going to come out of her mouth today, and I like that. I hate surprises, but I feel comfortable with who she is as a human being. So she might be a quiet ringer. You never know, Fred. We'll see how it goes. So that's who Alex is to me, and I'll let her tell whatever she wants to tell about how she knows me. But she's one of our first since we've been back talking to each other again since you've moved. So I think, Alex, we're going to turn it over to you, and you tell us whatever you want to tell us, and we'll poke holes in it and call you on it and ask you to expand on certain things and hopefully ask you some easy questions. And by the time we get done, our viewers will want to call you up and say, hey, how do you put up with that guy? Which, I'm sure you get a lot already. So Alex Howard, tell us who you are.
Who
don't start off. Don't start
think about you a lot.
What's that?
You must think that people think about you a lot.
No, very little.
So where should I start? What do you want to know?
Come on. I want to know, you've had stuff in your life that I haven't really heard about. I don't know if you want to talk about that or not, but your recovery and your commitment to helping others, I think people want to hear about it. I think it's inspirational for others to hear that, there is hope and help no matter what goes on in your world. If you're willing to do what it takes, you can get as much fun out of life as you possibly can. And from what little I know about you, I've heard you share that.
Well, life has been full of humaning and the life getting lifey for a number of years now. If we're going to jump right into recovery, I came to Alcoholics Anonymous when I was 26. I went to the Scripps McDonald Center when it was still in La Jolla at the hospital. I mean, this was February 23rd of 2000. And, I'd run out of options. I was unemployable. I was basically unlikable. I was living in my parents' house, sleeping with a bottle of whiskey under my pillow. I had alienated any real friends. Like, I really had it going on. And it seemed like I really had nothing better to do. Like, I had nothing else going on. So I went to rehab and I fell in love with Alcoholics Anonymous. But getting there, I'm a relatively late bloomer. In relative terms, and so many stories that I've heard, um, turn my volume down. I didn't start using and drinking until I was 18, and then I took a period of time off. But the first thing I found that I really, really loved was crystal meth. And it answered all of my questions. I could study, I could focus, I could pay attention to an entire conversation with another human being, all of those things. And I was taller, I was prettier, I was thinner, and generally better than everybody else. It really fed my self righteousness, and that stuff's delicious. And I had a boyfriend. We were engaged. He wasn't too keen on the drugs, so I white knuckled it until we broke up. Imagine that I, sabotaged a perfectly good relationship. And that's when I started drinking. And I'm a blackout drinker from the get. I love to drink. And I didn't draw a sober breath until that day I rolled into the McDonald Center. I came with all the accoutrements, a DUI, a lot of jobs in my wake, and a lot of squandered opportunities. That's one of the things that I look back now as an adult. There were so many great opportunities. I had a gig on air for a local music show at a radio station. I missed opportunities to participate in things like Rock and Roll Jeopardy and a few other things. Although I was on the Jenny Jones show, that was a good time. Just because getting high and getting drunk was way more important. That's the start of that. Where to go from there? I'm sure other things will come up. I got to tell the story of the DUI. Can I tell the story of the DUI? Because I didn't think that anything was my fault or responsibility, but someone was always at fault, and it just was never me, conveniently enough. And while I was working at that radio station, I had access to, lots of bars, music venues, musicians, and I was dating a guy in a band who went to play at, tell me if you remember this, Winston's 2 in Lakeside. I'm not familiar with Lakeside to this day, and I've lived in San Diego my entire life. And I get pulled over because I was following people, and I'm lost, and I didn't turn quickly enough when the light turned green. And I get pulled over right away, and I roll down the window. And one thing I somehow was able to maintain along the way is I maintained looking pretty presentable. I was not looking like your typical drug addict. And I said to the officer, I'm lost. I was following someone, and I don't know where I'm going. I just have to get to the 5 freeway. And his shoulders dropped, and for a second he was like, oh. And then my passenger, the lead singer's girlfriend from my boyfriend's band, leans over and goes, why the fuck are you pulling her over? Step out of the car, please. And she got out of the car while I was doing a field sobriety test and was screaming at the cops. And they were just so sick of her. They didn't impound my car. They left it in the Taco Bell parking lot. They didn't search my car. They didn't search me. Thank God, because I had a lot of drugs in my purse, which would have been possession with intent to sell. And, it was her fault. I blew a .09, but it was her fault that I got a DUI. And that was kind of my attitude about everything. And I didn't do anything about that DUI until after I went to McDonald Center after I got sober. I am a menopausal woman with a terrible, terrible train of thought. So ask me something.
So let me ask you that. Did you grew up in East County? Is that where you grew up?
Oh, no, I am not familiar. I'm from North Poway, and I'm actually living in my childhood home. It's been weird. I'm grateful for it, but it's been weird.
Yeah. So you live in Poway now as well?
Yep. Sure do.
I grew up out in East County. So I know Lakeside, but I didn't really drink there. I drank down in Mission Valley where the happy hours were when I was out in public. Yeah, some of the old days. So when you started drinking, were people that were close to you noticing it, or were you hiding it well?
They weren't noticing it as a problem. Definitely not the using. I think there's a lot of denial there. My dad is a periodic binge drinker alcoholic, though he won't tell you that. And my mom was alcoholic and then switched to pills. Pills were her bread and butter. And a little bit about my mom. My mom was definitely a clinical narcissist, and I love Brene Brown's defining narcissist in Atlas of the Heart, and it is the shame-based fear of being ordinary. And when I heard that, I was like, God, yeah, that's my mom. The priest I worked for, but definitely my mom. She never got over anything in her life, and she expected other people to bring her happiness, and deeply, deeply sad and self-absorbed and incredibly lonely, I'm guessing. The compassion that I found as I got older for my mom, she had to have been so lonely. So she was too busy with herself to really notice. And I quickly started to shuffle friends around, so my drinking would not be, as noticeable. I was just a good time. I'm not here for a long time. I'm here for a good time. I'm here to drink somebody under the table. I'm the entertainment. I'm going to do some wild shit. Am I supposed to watch my language? I should ask that question. Oh, fuck yeah. Thank you. So I evaded that, but for the most part, I went to work, and you could write off a lot of my behavior as just being in my early 20s, showing up hungover, things like that. But I called in sick a lot.
Who didn't?
Everything else was just gravy.
Who didn't? What radio station did you work at?
I'm not going to say. Thanks for asking them. Yeah,
they're still around there.
Shockingly, is still around. And it was just the local music show, but I enjoyed a lot of the benefits of the affiliation, for sure.
Yeah, I remember I was the media buyer in my family's business, so I got to go on all the big events that most of the media hosted, including a cruise that I was never nearly flown off of because of my behavior down to Mexico. But so I knew a lot of the people in the media world and print and San Diego Magazine, Union Tribune, because we had women's stores around town. And you may not know, but your mom might have. So tell us. What's that?
Scott. Hey, Scott, I just want to tell you, it's so interesting from being the person that doesn't have the addiction in their past, but to realize that even looking at you, looking at Alex, I would never in my life look at Alex and consider any of what she just said. And I think that's part of what our show is showing that this happens to can happen to everyone from every size, look, appearance. And I realize you're not the same person you were then, but I look at you and you just look like a normal, average, late 30s woman. How was that?
Say that last part again.
I'm very smooth with this. Late 30s.
If only you meant that.
I know. Well, I try to be as smooth as I can, but Scott calls me out on it usually. But it's a gift. I call it a gift, but it is. I like that part of our show that we get to introduce, that we show somebody like Alex who's willing to speak about. When I think of crystal meth, I don't think of somebody that looks like Alex. Is this common in the whole world that you deal with, Scott?
Look, that was my drug of choice. I was an unlicensed pharmacist, and that's what I sold was methamphetamine. So I don't think, there are the people who come with tats and missing teeth and really bad attitude. I'm talking tats. I mean, I served a guy once with a big swastika on his neck, and my team came to me and said, Scott, you okay helping a guy with a big swastika on his neck, being Jewish? I said, well, no, I don't mind. I mean, and getting him a job was difficult, but I actually helped him get a job in a tattoo parlor in Ocean Beach because he was really tatted up and he wasn't going to be able to walk into a Macy's or a bank and get a real job, or a traditional job or institutional job. So I try not to really think about what somebody looks like. Because when you think about crystal meth and then you look at cocaine, they're both stimulants. And you look at the people that are, doing cocaine versus somebody who maybe is doing crack. And, some people just don't want to spend all that money. So they take a lower expense, or like myself, I would just distribute so I wouldn't have to pay for it. I took it out of my profit. So
is it also, does it have to do with, also, I'm not California, obviously I'm East Coast, and I'm, without going into the ages and stuff, I'm going to assume that Alex is in my age range, and I didn't have any introduction to crystal meth in Connecticut. No, I didn't see this.
I think it was a West Coast drug. I mean, when you think about, God, I'm trying to think of what was a big one in New York. Cocaine. Well, but back in the day, it was harder to get. There was, I'm trying to think what it was called. Quaaludes. Quaaludes was really big on the East Coast. Stimulants were big. East County, a part of our community, was one of the biggest methamphetamine capitals per capita in the country back in the day. There were labs everywhere where people were making it because we had access to the, chemicals coming from Mexico. So we were able to do that easily. And I think that, there were different drugs on the East Coast, and, heroin was scattered throughout different places. Marijuana was picked up by everybody. It's different today because of opioids. It's different today because of, cocaine itself. But, methamphetamine is on the rise, just like marijuana is on the rise. And it's different trending today. And it's a lot more. Marijuana, of course, legal now in many states, so people are picking it up. But when you look at Alex and she shares that she was on crystal meth, when it comes out of her mouth, it's like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. You look like you live in an orderly home. You've got your own camera and you look like you're presentable. But that doesn't mean that you weren't. People who were using drugs and mood altering substances, there is no zip code specific for it. It goes everywhere.
It's interesting. It's interesting, Scott, because when I do, and I think a lot of it has to do with the media, with Breaking Bad, stuff like that, shows that someone like myself who wasn't involved in that world, I get even though I'm involved with you and I'm well aware of it now, I still get a skewed vision of what that person's supposed to look like based off of what I've been told or seen. And I think it's interesting and I think it's important that we show and talk about people such as Alex, that people in general, drugs touches everyone, no matter color, creed, height, size, all those things. So it's just interesting. It's always interesting. Every week's interesting with you, Scott. Every week.
Well, that's because you live in a small town and don't get out much.
I live in Charlotte, North Carolina now. I live in a very large city.
Now you do, yes.
I've been here a whole 6 weeks, Scott.
Yeah. So, Alex, what would you want people to know about you that you don't get a chance to maybe share with others? Did you grow up with siblings, or were you did you have sisters and brothers?
Yeah, if we want to jump into that, I was an accident and came along 10 years after my brother. So it was kind of like being an only child, but my brother, he looked out for me and he brilliant mind. Did great in school, science and math guy, went on to get his PhD, one of the leading cancer researchers in the world. And I rolled out this big ball of emotions with all these questions, and my parents were so ill equipped to deal with who I am. And my brother recognized that in me, and he took such good care of me. He passed in 2016 from, ironically enough, brain cancer. It was a big change, but it was like being an only child. He moved out when I was 8. He's 10 years older. He went to college when I was 8, and he was really great about still coming back and taking me out and taking me to his apartment with his buddies that he went to school with, that he grew up with, who knew me since I was a baby. And, it's pretty cool to be hanging out with a bunch of college guys when you're 10.
Yeah.
So.
Now you mentioned your father's issues, which he wouldn't admit to. You mentioned your mother's. Did your brother suffer from any of these?
No.
See, that's another thing. That's another thing that just boggles my mind every week, is how two parents could create, it's just everything about addiction boggles me when you look at the science of it. It makes no sense, but it makes perfect sense at the same time. It's quite astonishing sometimes.
At the end of his life, he was, I cannot think of the name of it now. He had the same brain cancer as Joe Biden's son, and he was only supposed to live for max 13 months. He lived for 8 more years. He fought cancer tooth and nail. And towards the end, parts of his brain had been cut out. The tumor is growing. And he was still drinking because huge. My brother was a huge man, 6'4" rugby player, big, strong, huge dude. But at the end, he found himself unable to stop drinking. And fortunately, one of his best friends, who's been sober since God was a child, she took him to meetings. And so I did get to attend a meeting with my brother. Do I think he was alcoholic? Not really. But he did not have a great relationship with alcohol. I could not stop drinking. I lived for drinking. He would drink and get a little sloppy, maybe not be the nicest guy from time to time. Extremely different. Extremely different. I like your dog.
She's busy. She's the watchdog. So what about the children?
one daughter, and getting there was a little difficult. Um, I'm going to get into the whole thing because it makes more sense that way. Um, I suffered a miscarriage, and turns out, we were going to need medical help, more on my husband's end. And when I first met my husband, he's accomplished, he's kind, he's funny, he's smart, he's intelligent. And at that point, I did not know that he was emotionally 12. Not a lot of experience with intimate relationships. So the handling of that was kind of klutzy, and I developed a really huge resentment. And it wasn't too long after that that I went to my Saturday morning women's meeting, and a woman who I had known for years. I'd been sober about a decade. Yeah, about a decade at that, almost 11, if not 11, at that point. A woman who would fall under the category of grave emotional and mental disorders showed up with her granddaughter, who she had emergency custody of. I work with children professionally. It's what I do. I love it. I'm a kid magnet. I love them so much. But when I laid eyes on this little girl, there was something different. Excuse me. I offered to her grandmother to help out, which became days and overnights and then weeks. She was filing for guardianship, and she knew that there was no way. She'd been involuntarily committed so many times. She said to me in a conversation one time, very casually, the last time my husband had me 5150'd, as I would say, like, the last time I drove to Escondido. It was just normal for her. She asked if we would step in. And of course, we were already in love with her. She was just a toddler. She was almost 2, named Zoe. And she came to us with a lot of issues due to in utero drug and alcohol exposure. She tested positive for meth and marijuana when she was born. And empathetic and bright and adventurous and always curious. As she got older, things got a little difficult. I'll just get right to it. Tomorrow it will be 2 years since we removed life-preserving measures at Children's Hospital. It was 6 days after she hung herself. So, yeah, I had a little girl. Her name was Zoe. She was remarkable.
Yeah, that's always the tough stuff to hear when we're dealing with life issues and parenting and stuff like that. But what a great thing you provided for her at that time, when she was young. She really sounds like she needed somebody like you at the same time. Unfortunately, we can't solve all these problems all the time. And it's just it's a problem still in the world today. And I'm sorry that that happened with you.
She she will always be my baby. I think the thing that was so different when I first laid eyes on her is that that's my little girl. Fear and you know, being keeping things appropriate. There was no way I would have verbalized it, but that was.
So you, in a way, you got a chance to pick your baby. A lot of people don't.
God picked her for me. There's one thing that in working with other grieving mothers, and I actually heard one person say once, that it was different when my child died because she was adopted. I'm really grateful that person didn't say it to my face, because every year around Mother's Day, I will share on social media just a little reminder that a mother is not made by giving birth. It's biology. I mean, if that's what made a mother, we would not have the issues in our society that we do with children in the system. It's being a mother is the showing up and the being there and the advocating and the loving and kissing every boo-boo and tucking them in every night and being the person that they know is always going to be there beyond a shadow of a doubt to provide security for a tiny human that is irreplaceable. That's what makes a mother. The love and the presence. She was very much so. She is a part of me.
And you were part of her.
And that makes perfect sense, as it all should be and stuff. So why do you choose to speak of it? What could other people learn from this situation that you speak out about it?
Talk about suicide. Talk about it. There are so many systemic obstacles towards teens and children getting help that they need. We are in the midst of the fight of our lives again with the school district, trying to get her the help that she needed. And there's still, and it's remarkable to me, hushed whispers, they died by suicide. Talk about it. Remove the stigma, remove the shame. I have no shame in the fact that that is how my daughter died. And I fought hard for her and I did everything that I can, because there are still people who will go, well, what's wrong with the parents? What is inside that human being's mind is not something that can be communicated. Now, do we think that she really thought that she would be ending her life that day? No, we don't. It wasn't the first time she'd, made an attempt, and she always came to me right after she tried something or something happened. And, she didn't want to put her laundry away to get her phone back. She said she was going outside. We never left her alone for more than 15 minutes, and it had been maybe 17 minutes. And my husband found her, and he ripped the branch off the tree. But I think talking about it openly and normalizing it, because there are so many kids, especially, that romanticize suicide. They attend memorials of peers and this outpouring of love and compliments, and no one has a bad word to say about the person. And it's what kids need now. And their brains are not developed. So the logic is not all there, as we know. Anyone who's raised a teenager knows it's not all there. But we need to normalize talking about it. That's the number one thing.
On that point, so recently I was reading about studies and stuff where there are certain, I don't know if it's states or countries or whatever, that are now referring to it as somebody that passed from mental health or passed. Do we need to change the verbiage to lessen the impact of the stigma?
I think so. This is just my opinion. It irks me when people say, well, your daughter passed away. No, she didn't pass away. She died. Pass away is something that is for the elderly who slip away in their sleep, the way that we're intended to. She died, and she died by suicide. And I'm okay with anyone in the world knowing that. And, kind of separates, the friends from the non-friends and how they react to that. But they died. Let's stop trying to put bumpers on it. Let's stop, putting it in pretty wrapping paper, because it's no longer time to, try and make it polite conversation. It's a conversation that needs to be had. In the Poway Unified School District in 2024, 12 children ended their own lives in the school year. So what is that? 1.3 children a month dying by suicide, by self-harm. Because I think one of the things that has happened by it being something you don't talk about, like people think their kids are going to catch it. No, your kids are catching it on social media. Your kids are catching it because it's this romantic idea in their heads. Again, train of thought gone. What was I saying before that?
Well, you're right. You are on the right. What you're saying all makes perfect sense, and I do. I know you're seeing it from one. You've got the real view, and sometimes when we're looking from the outside in, we do tend to ask questions that come off inappropriate. Sometimes it's probably innocent and non-malicious. You mentioned separating the friends from the non-friends. Like, I'm a person that tends to ask the wrong question at the wrong time, but it's never malicious. I'm not trying to, I just don't know the answer. I don't know the feeling. I could never be a person that says, tells you this is going to go away. I've never had this happen to me. It's never happened to me. I can't tell you that, but I could also say that and mean it non-maliciously, but it's not true what I say. But sometimes you're saying things just because we're trying to fill the void and we're trying to comfort, and it might be because we do care about you. So you have to determine who's the friend and non-friend in the militia.
The non-friend comes from how they respond when and it's only happened, I am surrounded by incredibly compassionate, well-informed people. There's only been one time where someone said to my face, it's all a part of God's plan. Well, fuck you and fuck your shitty God. My God had no plan for this. That's my God does not see to it that children are killed in this world. I'm sorry, you have a shitty God. But the best thing that people could possibly say is, there are no words. I'll be here for you. Because there are no words. There really aren't. And people have been so well-intending in trying to relate. I had one girlfriend who began to tell me, when her grandfather died. And she's trying to relate through grief. Fair enough. But your 95-year-old grandfather dying is different than my daughter dying by hanging from a tree branch. Because there is trauma involved. It is a violent way for someone to die. And in my professional life, I've done a lot of trainings and certifications and education around mental health. And one of the most fascinating series I've ever engaged in was speaking with a survivor of suicide. And she put the question out there, like, what is it when someone kills themselves? Now, if someone else killed that person, it would be murder. It is committing an act of violence against yourself. And I think that is important to talk about with kids, like just the facts, the basics. Let's be clear. Let's not tiptoe around it. It now that it's coming out of the shadows more, there's less polite conversation. No one wants to make anybody else uncomfortable. I don't give a shit if you're uncomfortable around me talking around about my child. Your comfort is none of my business. And I sound angry while I'm saying this, but I mean, honestly, it's not.
Well, I think part of it is also what you've been saying is because we don't talk about it, none of us are trained to accept this or to speak on it. And now that we're at an advanced age where you have compassion, we have all the needed things, we just don't have the background or the education. Nobody taught us that these are conversations that could be had if you use the right verbiage and you know what you're talking about and you know how to speak on it. So how do we get there? Me and Scott deal with this a lot, and with guests and stuff. We've talked to way too many people who have lost people to suicide, including Scott, whose whole sobriety forms around a suicide attempt. And that's another thing. And I think we had one guest on, I don't know if you remember, Scott, who said, I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to live. And that's what goes back to what you were saying. Your daughter, Zoe, you don't feel she was trying to kill herself. She just couldn't get in through that moment, that one wall. And that's what I keep saying to like people when I talk to kids and my kids and stuff. If they only knew 5 minutes, 10 minutes, everything gets different. It changes. It's better. Everybody, me, you, Scott, have all survived the worst days of our lives. We've all done it because we're here right now. We've survived the worst possible days of our lives, yet we can't convey that to our own children. Even if we do speak on it, you can't get in somebody's mind. And that goes back to what I was speaking of with you about your brother being different than you. The same parents create 3 different children, 3 different minds, 3 different, you don't know, this person could be a millionaire, this person could be dirt poor, same family. It's it's frustrating more than anything because there's no training. There's no way to speak on this. And I don't know what to say anymore. I just come at it from a compassion and try to think about what I'm about to say before I say, how would that affect me? Like if I was speaking to you one-on-one, I would say for every 10 things I said that were good in your mind, I'd say a bad thing. I'd go to that spot because I'm naturally curious. And that's a problem too. Curiosity isn't always compassion.
When it is coming from that place of compassion, and it's how someone reacts when I'll say, I know that you mean very well, but that's simply not helpful right now. And if they get offended and they get all butthurt about it, well, now I know exactly who you are. Most people, they try and apologize. Like there's nothing to apologize for. There is no right thing to say. To show compassion in return, take them off the hook.
Yeah, what a difficult situation. It's so frustrating because we could literally sit up all night and brainstorm. It could be me with compassion, Scott with compassion, and you with somebody that it's actually happened to, and we still couldn't come up with the curriculum to solve. It's such a big problem that it's too big for us. But where do we begin? Where do we start? Is it local? Do you become the town that is really good at this and the statistics drop? Because we know it's never going to stop. We're never going to get rid of it, just like addiction. We're not going to get this to 0%. But it's just a discussion. What do you got to say about this, Scott?
Well, I've been listening, and I don't spend as much time being quiet, so I appreciate your story, Alex.
We did a good job, Alex.
I know that the stigma around addiction has gone on for so long, and the way that people approach it is so, when it comes to mental health, it's so opaque that we don't talk about it. And there's usually the fear around the fact if we talk about it, and if we raise our hand to share about it, the assumption is, well, there's obviously you're somehow involved with it, and then you may live in a contaminated environment. And globally right now, I think we're all living in a contaminated environment. The hostility, the politics, the pressure, the name calling, the finger pointing is worse. And I think you and I have been talking about this enough, Fred, that a lot of this just catapulted through COVID. People got isolated. One of the bigger growing things now for young people is screen addiction, addicted to their phones, their iPads. And when they were in isolation during COVID, and we haven't seen the long-term effects of that. And I speak of that often because the underlying untreated trauma that people have when they grow up usually erupts in a very unusual way. And when you try to treat it in someone in their teens, even or 20s, it's gone on for such a long time. It takes time to fix or repair or improve or medicate whatever tool is necessary to help someone move throughout the day. And I still think there's a lot of judgment around it. And I think, if you had to come up with a simple way to talk about it, it's like you said, Alex, to talk about it. But it's not the kind of thing, how was your steak? How was your potatoes? Your salad looked good. Oh, and by the way, there's some mental health issues going on in our community. I'd like to chat with you about it. It just doesn't come up. But it can be part of the conversation. Just like you talk about other things, like you talk about sports and you talk about, celebrities and all these influencers right now who have their platforms could make major inroads. I mean, someone like a Taylor Swift makes a comment, millions of young people could be impacted. And getting that information to them and is probably one of the best, because prevention and education, which is rarely talked about, is one of the ways that we create systemic change. Go ahead.
Oh, no.
No, you're right, Scott, because it's very political in mind, because just like we've talked about so many times, mental health, suicide awareness doesn't garner votes, so it doesn't get spoken of. And nobody votes for less suicide. They're not voting. They're voting for taxes. They're voting for pay cuts and all this stuff. So politicians aren't aiming that way. Neither are schools. And I don't know. But before we end this, Scott, because we could probably go on for an hour on this, but we could always bring Alex back and speak on this specifically. What could since tomorrow is the day, I'm going to use the word to celebrate Zoe's life rather than mourn her life. What do you want people to do when they hear this podcast for Zoe?
I love that you asked that. Thank you. Every time you see a dog, I like your dog. From the time she was 2.5. She had a very expansive vocabulary, 2.5, God help me. But every dog she passed, whether we were driving or walking, and she had that weird drawl when she'd say it too, she'd go, I like your dog. And it brought joy to people. And that's why, Scott, you heard me say it earlier. And also, one of Zoe's great gifts was paying compliments to people who probably don't get a lot of them. The people that maybe people avoid conversation with or walk around when they see them. Zoe was very gifted at finding a piece of them and giving them a compliment. She had that sense. She always looked out for those people from the time she was very tiny. So tell
Yeah, so
somebody
we'll
you
do
like their
that.
dog.
And unfortunately, with all this, you're one of tens of thousands of mothers going through the same thing tomorrow. And it's so, and we're talking worldwide. You know, this isn't an American issue. This is a world issue. And it's something maybe we could do and change. And me and Scott are always looking for angles to change systematically something. We just don't know. Unfortunately, two people cannot change the world alone. So maybe if we do this for Zoe, we deal, remember the dog. You see a dog tomorrow, you see a dog the next day, just think of that. Think of, you know, I like your dog. I love your dog. Think of the kind thing you could say. But before we keep going, Scott, what you want to give your phone number, Scott?
I do.
While you're here? Why not?
619-993-2738. Don't be afraid to call. Alex was, but we finally got her there. And Alex, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story. And is there something, Alex, that you would like to, if somebody sees this, would you like them to call you or let them find you their way? Or are you looking for people to reach out? Or you sound like you have a pretty full load of folks that you not only manage, but and it sounds like hopefully your husband matured a little bit from 12 years old, so you're not parenting him anymore.
So wave to the camera, Alex, since you muted yourself somehow, which is a glorious thing. Listen, we all should have mute buttons like on our neck or something like that. It would solve so many problems, but we will do what we can. Let's remember Zoe tomorrow when we are out there. If you think you're having a problem today, let's think of other people. And as we say with every show, Scott, if nobody has told you they love you, we love you, and we will see you again next week.